Welcome to the NeuroTrition Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Z. I'm a dad, I'm a doctor, and I'm here to inspire you to help you heal both your mind and your body. Today's guest is Dr. Brett WIsniewski. Dr. Brett, thanks for joining us. And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about kind of the difference between alternative and functional medicine in the allopathic system, and a little bit about how COVID kind of exposed those differences to a bigger degree. The NeuroTrition Podcast is sponsored by North Florida Spine and Wellness and produced by Jumaine Delmas Studios. Dr. Brett, welcome to the show. Why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you look at medicine?
Sure. So I think my journey is probably not that unique. Saw a lot of family and friends deal with some chronic issues. As I started getting older and becoming more interested just in the human body, I think I spent a lot of time my younger years getting into weightlifting because, had to find a mate at some point in time. So it's a little bit easier. Yeah, growing up in Jersey, being close to the beach, having some muscles seemed like that was a smart idea. But I'm very thankful I got into that world because that's what originally exposed me to this idea that what you put in your mouth, and also, the output with physical activity, you can really change a lot of things. At that time, of course, I was more interested in the aesthetic, but as I've matured mentally, I realized that there's a lot of benefits beyond just the way you look, and it goes a lot deeper than that. And I know my mom struggled with some health issues when I was younger. She was diagnosed with Lyme disease, which is pretty popular in the Northeast. And I was also dealing with some rheumatism, so some autoimmune joint issues. And she was bounced around through the traditional medical model. And, just to be perfectly honest, I'm sure there was some help. I'm sure there was something that she received, whether it was medication or therapy, that was beneficial, but really not until she got into like the granola world of what it was called back then and started looking into vitamins, supplements, botanicals, some compounded nutrients is when things really started to change and turn for her. And then I wound up having kind of a weird experience when I was at the gym. I had this, I remember clearly I was probably, I don't even know if I was driving yet, so maybe 16 years old. I was laying on a bench about to do a bench press, and I unracked the weight, and I felt this heat kind of come up from the base of my spine all the way up around into my head. And I got this like wild headache. And I was really lucky as a kid, I would say, was that I didn't really deal with a lot of health concerns. I mean, I've broken 2 bones my entire life. One was my fibula, the other was my nose, as you could tell with this beauty right here on my face.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. So other than that, though, no major health concerns. That I didn't even have any hospital visits, even for those broken bones. So, having that experience around 16 years old, I was like, being a 16-year-old, I was kind of ignorant. I just went home, rested. A couple days later, back to the gym, and it happened again. So my mom phoned our local doc, went in. Doctor was like, I don't know, maybe this is like an aneurysm. And I didn't even know what that word meant at the time. Obviously, the internet was available, just not as robust as it is current day. So started doing some research on that. I was like, that doesn't make any sense for my age range and my overall health. So then she took me to the chiropractor. So we had kind of a family chiropractor that I saw every once in a while when I was a little kid. And she got me set up with him and saw him. And within just a couple of visits, I never had that sensation again. And I'm 40 years old now and haven't had it since. So that was really between what my mom was dealing with and then my own personal experience that drove me into natural medicine. Originally when I was little, the traditional, I want to be a firefighter, I want to be a cop. And then that morphed into wanting to do graphic design because I was always into the arts. But then that was kind of the final piece of information that I needed to experience in my life early on, that I think I want to go into medicine. And I think I want to err on the side of doing things more naturally, talking to folks about what goes in your mouth and the impact that it has on you. And then I was exposed to this idea that there's a group of doctors that could use their hands to solve some of these chronic issues. And then just kind of went from there. Undergrad, did kind of a traditional pre-med-ish track, chemistry, biology, and then eventually actually sat next to Dr. Zaideman for graduate school in chiropractic college. After that, just kind of had this thirst for information. So did a lot of postgraduate work with nutrition, did some in kind of what we call the natural internal medicine world, where we learn some of the traditional diagnostics, but then we use this more holistic application of therapies, which ranges from lifestyle, diet, homeopathics, nutraceuticals, pretty much anything and everything we can throw at the patient to actually solve the problem. And, the cheesy term that we all use, the root cause. And it's been great. Been doing it for, I don't even know when we graduated, 12, 15 years, something like that.
The numbers are getting depressingly higher for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. I've been very thankful. There's been struggles. The COVID years, which I know is what we want to talk about today, have been eye-opening for myself as well as the general population. And I think it's only really solidified my choices and, some of the patients that have been ridiculed by their family and friends for choosing natural medicine for some of these chronic conditions. They're now realizing maybe this is where we need to start.
And we definitely want to talk about COVID, because I think COVID really didn't create the problem as much as it just exposed the differences between, kind of how we look at people's health versus how the allopathics look at health. If you had to put in a simple explanation, how would you explain the difference between how the allopathic, your traditional PCP or internal medicine doctor would look at someone's symptoms and condition versus how me and you would?
Yeah. So, and I tell patients this too, use a great term, exposed. I think COVID really exposed the love affair between science and politics. This is something that I think you and I were aware of for decades at this point in time, but the average person just really didn't understand. Some people talk about Big Pharma. And yeah, that's obviously a big part of it with the lobbying money and the things that they're able to do without any kind of justification or proof beyond they just have a large wallet. But the folks that were busy, they work every day, dual income household, their kids are in sports, and they just don't have a time to dig into this, and they shouldn't have to, right? That's kind of the ugly side of medicine. And what it exposed is the inaccessibility to independent thought. Right. A lot of these traditional doctors and even some natural doctors too, I think we have to be fair when we have conversations like this. And I don't think it's good to continue to have these polarizing conversations and create these teams. But there is a large group of people that are just in lockstep. They'll do whatever the establishment is telling them to do. And they don't have this independent thought. And honestly, they don't have the autonomy like a smaller practice like mine or yours might have, because they're beholden to a giant corporation. And that giant corporation is, basically just run by a bunch of shareholders, and all they care about is money. And let's not get it twisted. I like money. I'm sure you like money. It does make life easier. But I don't think you could put money in front of being ethical when it comes to medicine. There's other industries that I think money can be in the forefront of the conversation. But when you're in medicine, there's a lot of sacrifice that you need to make. And that might be financial, doing the right thing for the patient, even if it's not what makes the biggest buck. With primary care, at least out here in northern Colorado, they've basically just become triage medicine. Right? You're going to your primary care for a referral. That's about it, right? They might give you some basic antibiotics. They might do some real cursory testing. But other than that, you're going to neurology for your headaches, you're going to rheumatology for your joint pain, you're going to psychiatry for your depression. They're there to kind of point you in which direction. And honestly, you have to see them because your insurance, for whatever reason, doesn't allow you to see the specialist without that silly referral letter. Even though hey, I have MS or I have symptoms of MS. I know my PCP isn't going to do anything. If I call my PCP, they're going to tell me we can't do anything for you, but I still have to go, right? So that's just a bunch of bloated crap that we currently have in our system. And they've created a cookbook at this point in time. You go in, you're this age, you're this weight, you're this gender, you have these symptoms, this is the condition you have, here's the drugs we have to offer, and here's the dosage. that you're going to take. And then when you have side effects to those drugs, if they're not successful, hopefully they are. But if they're not, well, then we give you this layer of drugs to mitigate those side effects. And then at some point in time, the more complex you get, the more doctors you see. The more doctors you see don't provide any kind of clarity. It actually adds to the complexity. And then you're the one stuck with the symptoms. You're the one stuck with the altered lifestyle. You're not able to get out of bed, hold a job, hang out with your kids. And they're just making a ton of cash because they are not paid based off of their product. They are paid off of numbers. So however many people they can see is how much they get paid. Where again, seeking out even a traditional doctor that has more of a, kind of a family style practice, they're going to make money, which again, I think it's okay if we do as doctors, even though it's kind of dirty to talk about making money off of sick people. But at the very least, you should be making more money with the better outcomes that you have. And that's just not the way the system is set up. Like in our clinic, with what we do, we're a complete cash-based practice. So we're fee for service, which means that you're using your hard-earned money to come see us. At any point in time, you can leave. There's not a giant corporation feeding me a bunch of patients. So I need to do my very best to provide some sort of service and benefit, even if it's not getting you better, but pointing you in the right direction with inside medicine so that you refer your family and friends. Now, I would like to think that I would do that anyway, even without having that particular metric, but it really helps, right? I mean, there's certain times where I'm sure we'd all love to be like, just take your antibiotic or just take your Medrol dose pack for your inflammation.
Right.
But people are paying because they want to know why. Like, what is actually wrong with me? And I'm kind of excited. This whole AI thing that everyone's talking about, I mean, I don't think any of us know where it goes. And I don't want to see anybody lose their income or their ability to, support their family. But I think we're going to quickly see that the traditional PCP and urgent care are going to be the first to go in medicine because they've created this problem. Again, you walk in, here's my symptoms, here's how old I am, what do I take?
It's basically, it's basically a logarithm now, is what they're doing. And you can even go back, when you go back into COVID years, even going back to your idea about with the money incentives to it, we have to go back and look is like, did really all these people die from COVID or did they just die with COVID? Because hospitals were literally getting paid more money when somebody died, if they had a COVID diagnosis. So you would have people literally getting in motorcycle accidents and they would swab their nose even after they're dead and find, here's a positive COVID. And then that now gets listed as a COVID death because the hospital would make more money. And that's really driven by, like you said, the corporate structure, the administration, and that side of things. I'll never forget, we have a patient who's a cervicothoracic, does a lot of open heart surgery. She's a nurse, but she's been doing it for a couple decades. And she was telling me, you talk about outcome, there's even been a push to try to do some outcome-based payments. But she was telling me, like, if you had a patient and you lowered their cholesterol by, let's say, 20%, and you did it from diet and exercise, you would actually get a lower grade from Medicare than you would if you lowered it by the same amount by giving them the statin medication. So how backwards is that? It's an unbelievable thing that we're seeing in medicine. And I really would say it's been going on for a long time. In a really weird way, I think COVID helped expose this and showed that, people are not always being told the truth by this system. And I think we saw it with a lot of the treatments during COVID. I mean, there were, I forget what percentage of the people who died had low vitamin D, for instance, right? How in the heck was vitamin D not one of the primary things people should have been done preventatively for COVID? I mean, doesn't that just like blow your mind?
Well, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of these programs for pre-vaccines, pre-healthcare in the traditional sense, and the amount of money that was put into them versus what we got out of them or what those patients got out of them is kind of laughable. And, of course, there's always that vaccine debate, which probably, won't get into today. But like, what what would we have seen if the government took a fraction of that cost and sent everybody in America a bottle of vitamin D, or sent them zinc or vitamin C, or incentivized communities to create these, even if we wanted to be generous and say, the 6 foot distancing and the masks and all of that were actually helpful, which, I think you and I are probably on the same page. But let's say they were, why couldn't we create these outdoor exercise programs for these kids that were stuck at home so they can still be active and they can still socialize and we can still promote this general health? But this idea has been disseminated way before COVID. I treat a lot of patients with cancer, mostly in a hybrid model, meaning they are receiving some traditional medicines, and then we're buddying it up with things that actually help the chemotherapeutics and the immunotherapies work better. So maybe they don't have to take as much of a dose, and or the complete opposite. We're actually supporting their bodies to be able to handle more rounds of the traditional oncotherapies. And it's really interesting. My patients will be sitting in an infusion suite and the nurses are passing out donuts and Coke products. And, my patients are drinking smoothies and water and fasting, and they're doing fantastic. Right. They're doing well. Again, either the cancer itself is resolving quicker than the doctor thought, or they're in the chemo suite a lot longer than the doctor thought, because a lot of these folks are failing out of chemotherapy, not because of the cancer, but the drug itself is killing them. And no one's asking them any questions. No one's asking them, why are you here at visit 16 and you haven't had to take a 3-month break? Why are you laughing and smiling and have your energy and still have your hair while you're going through this chemotherapy? And I do not, or my patients don't. They actually tell patients, and I'm sure you've heard this too, that diet does not matter.
Yes.
And it's insane. Everyone has experienced that. Have you ever eaten just a large meal, just overate? You get tired. You're going to tell me that had no bearing on your fatigue? You had Thanksgiving meal and then you wanted to pass out on the couch. At a very low level, we all know what goes in our mouth has an impact on how we feel. And then you have this, quote unquote, ultimate disease of cancer. And then we totally just, no, doesn't matter at all. Do whatever you want. The drugs will take care of it. And it's just wild, because when you look at the outcomes, it doesn't support them being able to dictate the care completely, yet they still have this God complex where it's like, you don't do anything different, we'll take care of it. And it would be one thing if we saw 90% success, but we definitely don't see that in a lot of these chronic conditions.
No, and to your point of in fairness, I think it's important for people to realize that I think part of the problem is the training. MDs do get basically zero nutritional education. They're just not trained in some of the things that we're trained in. And I think that, when your training kind of dictates that, it's going to dictate your thought process too. I had a patient who he's grossly overweight. He's pre-diabetic, not diabetic yet. And his primary care literally recommended to him that he should get diabetes on purpose. Just go ahead and eat whatever he wants, get diabetes on purpose. So then his insurance would cover Ozempic for him to lose weight.
Yeah.
That was the recommendation.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at. And what drives me crazy is then they'll follow that up and, criticize or shame people who seek alternatives because it's not evidence-based, right? And, especially when you go back to COVID, the evidence was, I would say pretty bluntly, especially when you look at the vaccines, I don't mind talking about that. They lied to us about it. They said, what did they say? 99% that was going to prevent you from getting sick. And then what was it? Weeks that like, oh no, it's not going to prevent you from getting sick. It's just going to make you not die. And it's insane that, they wanted to do all that and now just lecture us on, what is evidence-based. And I think we need to have a bigger discussion on what that even means, because a lot of it is just due to, where does the evidence come from? It comes from billions of dollars that are put in to study stuff. They're pharmaceuticals, right? A lot of things that we utilize just aren't studied.
Yeah, I always tell patients that before you spend a lot of time digging into the research and trying to learn the medical lingo, just use common sense, right? So like if you and I got together and I was like, hey Matt, I want you to empty out your savings account. I have this study that I want to do, and I want to prove that substance X cures Y disease. And you're like, sounds kind of fishy, but if it turns out to be true, then this could be huge. So you talk to your wife, you sit down, you're like, hey, we're going to leverage our income and we're going to put some money into this research. And I do the same thing. And
Sure.
we get about 6 months into it, we're down to our last dollar, and I give you a call and we're like, hey man, it's not looking good. I was off. Substance X doesn't do shit, and disease Y is not affected at all. Like, what do you want to do? Right. And an ethical person would be like, we got to publish our findings, and we got to say that substance X does not cure disease Y. And the reason why we would publish that finding is because we're going to save somebody else a lot of time, heartache, and money in the future to not study substance X. But what we do instead now in medicine is we say, well, what about these 3 people that seem like they got a benefit from substance X with disease Y? Like, what was the difference there? And it's like, there was something else they were taking, or something with their genetics. And it's like, well, let's get rid of the 100 other people that we studied, and let's just produce the results on those 3 people. And now we went from a 95% failure rate to a 99% success rate because we've manipulated the data. And that's not what science was supposed to be. And that's what it was every step of the way. And it was so frustrating. But the other part to this story is on us, right? So like, we have to recognize that we've done such a piss poor job in natural medicine explaining what we do, right? We're just sitting here complaining about the respect that we don't get from the traditional medical community or from society in general. But it's the onus is on us to show folks how beneficial this is, and that it actually does work, and it's not snake oil, it's not fake medicine. I don't care about, people are like, you're not a real doctor. Great. I don't want to be a real doctor if a real doctor is what I've seen happen for the last 110 years that they've been in control of medicine. Go into a crowd of people and keep your eyes open and do a 360. Tell me if you're happy with what you see. Are you happy with the amount of energy that people have? Are you happy with the obesity that people are dealing with? Are you happy with the moods that people are experiencing? And if you're not, that's traditional medicine being in control. Not that they shouldn't have a seat at the table, but it should be equal. We should recognize our strengths and our weaknesses from both sides and come together for the patient and say, hey, listen, if we're dealing with an urgent, acute, inflammatory disease that's driven by some sort of pathogen, this might be the time and place for things like prednisone and antibiotics. But if this is a patient who's been dealing with this for the last 6 years, putting them on another course of those drugs that haven't worked before probably doesn't make much sense. It's maybe time to think outside the box, and there might be something else going on. But we just don't have that opportunity because we, as natural practitioners, haven't done a great job explaining what we do. And I'm hoping now with COVID, they've been exposed finally, all the things that we've known, and we might now have that chance. I hope we don't ruin it.
Well, and even to your point earlier, we need to be able to stand up and, like you said, explain what we do, but also not alienate the allopathics too. Because like you said,
Correct.
there is a time and place. I always use the example of my patients. Like if I'm having a heart attack, going to the hospital, you know what I mean? Like that's not a time for vitamin C or what, you know what I mean? Like there's some really acute care that needs to happen. And I think that's the problem. A lot of the people out there, they don't necessarily have a disease. They have a lot of metabolic and cellular dysfunction. Their body's just not functioning optimally. And a lot of that's, their lifestyle for sure, and what they're eating and lack of exercise and those types of things. But when you're having dysfunction, the medical system's more set up to treat the disease process. And if you're doing that, that's great, but we have to have a bridge that gap. We've got to get these providers together so we can work together. And I think that would be the ultimate improvement in our healthcare system if we could bridge our two thought processes together. And I think they're very compatible. They just got to be used appropriately. And I think that's even where natural practitioners sometimes get in trouble, because they even want to in critical situations sometimes use our inappropriate tools at that time. So I think those are all things that that need to happen to make this system better. And I'm hoping that COVID is going to help do that, because I don't know about you out there in Colorado, and certainly our experiences in Colorado versus Florida were probably very different. But I'm already seeing a lot of nurse practitioners and even MDs become more interested in alternative medicine, because I think a lot of them kind of saw that some of the stuff that was happening just didn't make sense. Are you seeing that same thing?
Yeah. I had this conversation with a patient the other day. I'm excited for it. I'm also a little bit frustrated with it, because some things that we have known and studied for a few decades now are now this like new hot topic.
Like long COVID?
Yeah, so we got long COVID, which is just post-infectious syndrome that we've dealt with forever, right? From influenza, or your standard.
We were told that wasn't real at the time.
Yeah, and the reasons for it, right? The underpinnings of the inability for your body to handle stress, dealing with usually having this low cortisol pattern, which translates to a lot of these other peptides trying to take over for what that steroid hormone is supposed to do for us. But then you also have some of these folks, and again, I'm thankful in one hand, but frustrated in another, that are now starting to talk about like MTHFR, right? This genetic problem that's going to cure the world, and we found it, and you're going to take these methylated B vitamins, and everything's going to be great. And it's like we've been there and we've done that. Like I heard about MTHFR even before we graduated 12 years ago. And now, these folks are going to their medical doctor, and their medical doctor's like, we're going to run MTHFR. And if it comes back positive, we're going to put you on X, Y, and Z. And it's like useless, and we could talk about nutrigenomics maybe in the future, but it's like, no, we're not there yet. You can't give someone false hope that this one genetic SNP
is going to fix all their problems. Yeah.
Cure everything and everything. Does it matter? Probably to a certain degree, but we've already tried that. Back to the analogy of the research, like, listen to us. Like, we've been there, we've done that. Can we move on? Can we look for something else? Because it doesn't work the way you guys think it's going to work, and you give these patients a false sense of hope that my doctor's running something new. This is going to be great, and it doesn't pan out to be true.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to COVID, I think these effects had even a deeper problem beyond the medicine. It did harm even into childhood development. I mean, keeping these kids in masks, keeping them out of school, especially very early in life. I'll never forget, my son being on the spectrum. He had what's called an IEP plan, and I'll never forget, I knew I needed to take him out of the school system when number one goal when we were opening back up for schools, which was thankfully pretty quickly compared. I don't know when Colorado opened back up. I think it was a little bit later. They wanted him to wear a mask. And, whenever that kid tried to wear a mask, this is a nonverbal kid, by the way, if you know how the brain develops, and you need to develop nonverbal communication before you develop verbal communication. So you're going to put a nonverbal kid who already has piss poor nonverbal communication, and you're going to put him in a mask, and everyone around is going to have a mask on. So guess what? He's not going to learn nonverbal communication. He's not going to pull up social cues from facial expressions and things like that. And it's going to be completely ineffective, because you know what you did when you put him in a mask? He chewed on the damn thing the whole time. Mm-hmm. It literally had zero benefit. And we're going to see, I think, and we've already seen neurodevelopmental disorders increase, and I think we're going to see a further increase of that just because of what we did to those kids in school. So it's not just like how we've harmed our physical bodies and adults. I think we have impacted a whole generation for that, unfortunately. But I think, to pivot here a little bit, if people are listening to this, and a lot of this is probably resonating to them, because I think a lot of patients that we see who come to us, they don't start with us often, right? They're coming to us because they're so frustrated that they're going to their PCP, they're having these symptoms, they feel like crap, but they're not doing anything about it. They're either just, like you said, referring them, or they're telling them they need a psych med because it's just in their head. There's nothing wrong with them because their cholesterol is normal and their CBC is normal, and that's all they run. Apparently, I've even run into like primaries not wanting to run vitamin D even because there's controversy behind that now. But what would you say to a patient who doesn't know where to start? Maybe someone like us is not next door to them. What are some steps they can start taking with their doctors they have now to start taking charge of their own healthcare?
Yeah, I think the first thing that people need to do is understand who they're working with and make sure that their thoughts align. So, asking questions such as, what can I do with my diet to help impact my current disease state or my goals? And if the doctor says something along the lines that, oh, diet doesn't matter, then you run as fast as you can, right? Understanding that this is a process and there is no pill for every ill, and that does include even the natural world. And there needs to be some lifestyle conversations centered around clean water, good food, and activity is really, really important. I'm a little biased because of the way that we run our practice and the group of folks that we're involved with. I usually encourage people to find a doctor that's not incentivized by the insurance industry and also not beholden to the insurance industry. Because like you said, a lot of what they're going to do for you is going to be what your insurance covers, not what's necessary. So these insurance companies are basically practicing medicine without a license. They've never met you, they've never seen you, they're just collecting premiums, but they're dictating every step of your care. So seeking out a doctor that is maybe in the fee-for-service model, as painful as it might be financially, I think you at least have a lot more power. All of my patients, when I'm sitting in front of them for the 60 and 90 minutes that we spend with them, for that period of time, they are my boss. They are going to tell me what they want, and they're going to tell me what they think that we should do. I am only there to listen and to suggest the next best steps forward. But if they say, I want a food allergy test, even though I don't think that's best for them, I'm going to check the box and we're going to run the food allergy test. Or if they want to get the MTHFR gene tested, I'll give them my spiel on why I think their resources are better used elsewhere. But at the end of that visit, if they still want to run it, we check the box and we run that for them. And again, I'm trying to get them results, not only because that's what I love to do and that's what really rewards me, but they're not going to send their family and friends to me, which is what I truly need to exist as a practitioner and to maintain a business, unless they are satisfied, whether that's getting them better or at least feeling like they were heard. The bar is so low in medicine right now. Just listening to somebody, half the people that sit in my office just cry, only because we have 90 minutes to talk. And it's like, it's crazy to think that all you need to do is just listen to the patient and explain things. Take the time, not the 7 minutes. Take a half hour, 45 minutes, 60 minutes. This is someone's life. We only get one of that, right? It's not like a car that you can get a new one or we can replace parts and such, right? So it's like to spend 7 minutes with somebody, a 65-year-old woman who's been through, decades of whatever, and you think you're going to get a full history on her in 6 or 7 minutes it's absolutely insane.
It's 100% therapeutic just to listen to the patient. I mean, I get patients who walk out feeling better just because I took the time to listen to them and take their concerns seriously. Even if I, think that, some of their theories aren't down the right track, you still have to gain that patient's trust. And I think that's important. And, you kind of alluded to a point where it's important to realize your doctor, including me, is not in charge of your body, is not God. And you can say no to their recommendations, to their treatment plan. You can question it. You are allowed to do that. You are allowed to go get a second opinion. I see patients who are even afraid to go do that. But I think those are all really important things that people can do. And just work on some simple lifestyle things. Get out, touch grass, move a little bit, start eating real food. And those are all things that everybody can do, even if you're not sure of what provider is right for you. Well, Dr. Brad, I really thank you for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts. There's a lot of really good information. Can you tell people where they can find you if they want to work with you more?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, our clinic website is gatewaynaturalmedicine.com. I'm not really good at social media, so I don't have any social media you can follow. It's probably better, otherwise I'd be in jail by now. Yeah, that would probably be the best. Just go to the website. You can reach out if you have any questions or you're interested in exploring some opportunities with us.
Absolutely. And so thank you, everybody, for joining us on this episode of the NeuroTrition Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast. You can go to neurotritionpodcast.com, follow us on all of the major podcast streaming platforms, and then also follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok at neurotritionpodcast.com. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Appreciate you. Thank you.